Hello lovely people, how are you all today? I hope you're well. I'm so much better for a bit of sunshine. Can you feel that light coming in? Oh, it's brilliant, it's lovely. We have had day after day after day, excuse me, of lashing rain, howling winds. We are right in the middle of winter storm season. And there's another on its way, I think. Is it for the weekend? Storm Ivo is on its way. We've just had storm, it's not Hermione, but it's something like that. Hermine? Anyway, winter storm season, horrible weather. What better than to hunker down indoors and get on with making some more lavender bags. Excuse me, I've got a tickle again. Yeah, I've been at it again because I had some lavender of my own left over, but I've also bought a bit more to top it up. I managed to find some lovely organic lavender, so I shall mix that with my own so that all the bags will still have some of my lavender in. But I thought today I'll show you how I make them, and then if you want to make your own, I'm doing myself out of business here, aren't I? You can have a go at making your own. So I'm going to show you every single step apart from selecting the fabrics and cutting them, because that is undoubtedly what takes up most of the time. So I have ready cut, they're going to hopefully stay on the cutting mat, ready cut our pieces today. So I've got my 4 small squares to make up the patchwork. They are 10 centimetres each. The larger square to make up the back is 18 centimetres square. Why is it smaller than the little pieces, Vivi? Because by the time we've sewn the seams on these 4 pieces, those seams, the seams are 1 centimetre each. There's one here, we lose 2 centimetres. So where we've got 20 centimetres to start with, we lose 2 with the seams, therefore the back is only 18 centimetres. So I've only got a small cutting mat. It's a tiny cutting mat, just because I've got a small sewing table. You may have a big one. Look, I should just say right from the beginning, I'm going to describe everything today as if you were a complete beginner with your sewing machine. Maybe you got a new sewing machine or your first ever sewing machine for Christmas. Yay! If you can hear, the iron is on as well, because we need to, there's a couple of stages where we'll be pressing, so it's just, I don't know if you can hear it bubbling away, getting up to temperature to make steam. Yes, so I'm going to talk about all of this as if you're a complete novice. Those of you who are very, very experienced, just hang out and do some sewing with us. So, cutting mat, and then to cut my squares. The reason it takes so long is because I do it on a much, much bigger scale. With my little squares like this, I'm cutting hundreds of them. So I do use a rotary cutter. That's it, the blade is closed at the moment and protected. If I lift the guard back, you can see, oh, that's a sharp, sharp edge. Leave the protector on it for now. So with that, I could probably go through about 6 or 7 layers of fabric. I don't do that much in one go. I go through about 4 layers at most, because I'm always trying to fold it in a way so as to create as little waste as possible. And when you're cutting, make sure you cut on the square. And by that, I haven't got a piece, I'll use this tea towel. This tea towel's there to catch any drips when the steam gets too much. Imagine if this is your piece of fabric that you've bought. When I say cut on the square, I mean cut your squares sort of in line with the edge. So there's a square. Rather than cutting your square, if I put that one there, can you see it? Yeah. Rather than cutting it so that your squares, you're cutting them in any old direction, if you do that, you're cutting it on what's called the bias. And what happens then, I'll try and demonstrate with the tea towel actually. If I pull it this way, there's no give. If I pull it this way, it's a great tea towel, isn't it? It's my suffragette tea towel. If I pull it this way, there's no give. But if I pull it on the diagonal, can you see? I hope that shows there is some give. That's the bias going diagonally across, going at sort of 45 degrees across the cloth. Cutting on the bias is used a lot, for instance, in dressmaking. It can make a garment really hug a figure. If we think of 1930s garments, a lot of them, they're cut on the bias and they'll really kind of sweep over every curve of your body. Great if you've got a gorgeous hourglass figure, not so much if you're lumpy and bumpy. So try and make sure you're cutting on the square, and it might be tempting when you've got those scraps and you're trying to get your 10 centimetres out of it, that you do end up going on the bias. You'll do yourself a disservice though, because when you come to sew everything together, that give in it, you can end up sort of stretching it out of shape, and then you're not going to get a nice smooth flat finish to your work. So yeah, cut on the square. So I use my rotary cutter. That means I can get 4 pieces done in one pass of the cut. And I use a metal ruler. And I'm going to try and show you this one end on. Oh, look, it shows up there just about, doesn't it? Do you see on this edge, there's a slightly, where can I, oh, it's going to be hard. If I put it there with the grandfather clock in the background, I think you get the point, that slightly raised edge. So I'm right-handed, so I'd actually have this the other way round. So that slight edge is there, so that when I'm working this, I'm pressing down on my fabric and I pass the rotary cutter, I'm going to show you sideways now, along that edge. I can keep the rotary cutter pressed against it, and it's just going to protect my fingers than if I didn't have that edge. If I was doing it this way around, as I'm pressing, I could easily kind of end up, instead of coming along like this, I could end up just going whoop and accidentally coming across my fingers. So I really like this edged rule. I can't remember where I probably bought this online. Have a look online. For me, it's just a safety thing, and also it's got this little sort of rubber strip down it. Is it rubber? I'm not sure what it's made from. Slightly rubbery strip, and that just means, again, it's about grip and not having things slipping, so that I'm doing it standing up normally. As I'm going along, everything's good and secure on my cutting mat. My fingers are behind that edge. Even though my fingers are behind the edge, obviously I'm still going to take great care as I slice along. So you've cut your pieces. It's now time to get sewing. I should say, yeah, as I say, the cutting, I find that's the thing that takes the longest amount of time. Of course, the thing that takes the longest amount of time is growing the lavender, then harvesting it, then drying it, then processing it. But that's all done. Oh, sorry, just quickly, a word on your patterns. So the one I'm doing with you, I've chosen in particular because what I wanted, I wanted the stark contrast sort of pick up on camera. These patterns work whichever way up they are. So if I turn it all around, if I was to make it that way up, it still works. Just be careful when you're cutting those. So for instance, I've done these ones already. It's quite subtle, but then if you look in closely, can you see there are little hearts? So this one is backed with the heart pattern as well. So just double check when you're cutting, which is there a right way up or down with the fabric? Check when you're cutting, and then also check again before you start to sew and put it all together. This one as well, this one's really subtle. See, it's books on shelves. So you can see all the bottoms are level, but at the top there's different levels to it. Is it more clear on that section? And at a glance you might not notice, but then you will notice it and go, oh no, it's upside down. So just take a moment to look at your pattern, and if it has got one little subtle thing in it, like just one little heart, make sure it's the right way up. Okay, we've cut everything, let's get sewing, and let's get, actually, the ironing board is right next to me because, as I say, we will be pressing bits. So, I'm going to keep you there and tip you down. That might, oh, you might need to come over my shoulder. I've got to think about this. This is where I need a second pair of hands. I need a lass here working as my camera lass. I think I might need to bring you round. Hang on a tick. The light's going to be a bit weird today as well. It's bright moments and then it goes a bit shady. Okay, so where I finished off last night, I've got the wrong colour thread on. So that's the first thing we're going to do is change the thread, and we're going to make a bobbin. So I'm just going to take off my blue thread. And like I said, I know that the vast majority of you can probably do all of this in your sleep. Or I'll wind that properly later. In your sleep. Standing on your head, what have you. But for those who don't. Right, out comes my blue bobbin from last night. So I've got my yellow thread. I'm just going to put it on my thread spool, and that's just my thread keeper. It just keeps it on the spool. Now, because I want to make a bobbin before I start sewing, I'm not going to thread up my needle. This is the thread I want on the bobbin. So the bobbin is the bit that goes in the bottom, and it's the reverse side of your work. It's the stitches on the other side. So as it's almost like we're laying a piece of thread, the top thread along, and the bobbin thread is like, oh, it's kind of hooking onto it, sort of. So I want it in the same colour. Now look, all machines are going to vary slightly, but it should have the same principle. On the top of mine, if you can see, so normally if I'm threading the needle, I'd actually thread all the way behind and under that, but I'm not doing that, I'm just doing a bobbin. So there's a little stay here. I'm going to wind it around. And all that does is it just keeps a little bit of tension on the bobbin thread, so that it doesn't sort of go floppy and flying and then tangle. Then I'm going to just, is it a bit awkward? Where's my hole? Just get my little bit of thread. Do you know what it is? Because it's I'm going to have to do it down here against dark background. I've just passed a little bit of my thread. Oh, it's so hard to show. The bobbin's got a hole in it in the top. I've just passed a little bit of thread up through that. Then I'm going to pop it onto the bobbin holder, and I'm going to keep hold of that thread for now, just while it all gets wound on. Nudge it. Oh, let me show you. So I'll show you really exaggeratedly, so you can see there's a bit of tension on it there. Now the other thing to do is where you've got the arm, your handle, your sort of where you're doing it manually, pull that out. You'll hear a clunk or a click. That has now disengaged the gears, so that my needle isn't going to go up and down and up and down and up and down. Now, where's my thread? It's so awkward. I really could do with a second person here filming for me. So now if I press the treadle down, you see it starts spinning on. I'm still holding that top bit of thread, but there's enough that's wound on now to hold that in place. I can just cut that off now and get rid of it. I wouldn't normally hold such a long thread, obviously, if I was just doing it myself. Just hold it here. Keep winding, keep winding, keep winding. I'm not going to wind a huge amount on because I don't need a huge amount, but, so I'll stop now because of the noise. Once the bobbin is actually full, this little thing here, it sort of nudges against it, and it will eventually, it'll get so full, it'll push it back from that into its off position. So if I press the treadle down now, nothing's happening. In other words, you can keep your foot on your treadle, and if you take your eyes off the bobbin for a second, when it's full, it'll kind of automatically stop itself. But that's enough just for what I want today. So, get that off, and then when it comes to putting your bobbin in the bobbin holder, my machine actually, what can we do to make it show? No, blue thread behind it. Oh, there we go. The cover of my bobbin holder actually shows the direction in which to place the bobbin in the bobbin holder. But like I said, all machines are going to be slightly different. So I'm not going to show you this exactly because it might be different on your machine, but your manual should tell you. Also, if you haven't got a manual, perhaps you've bought, getting nice and warm now, perhaps you've bought a second-hand machine, then have a little look online, because the chances are, look on something like eBay. So I'm just going to, have a look on eBay, you may find a copy of the manual for your machine. So my machine also very handily, although obviously once you're used to it you don't even bother looking, all the points at which to wind my thread before it goes through the needle, they're all marked. 1 at the back that I've just gone round, number 2 down here, I'm going to re-engage my gears, number 3 in the top, passing it through. Number 4 is just above the needle, and number 5 is through the needle, so I have to concentrate on this bit a second because it's fiddly. Front to back. Oh, look at that, in one shot straight through. So now I'm threaded in the top and I've got my bobbin ready. You might have noticed I didn't put the bobbin cover on yet. I'm holding the end of my thread, top thread. Manually, I'm now going to wind the needle down. You'll see it goes right through, slowly, and it's going to start coming back up again. And as it comes up, it does a pass over the bobbin casing and picks up the bobbin thread, which now, because it's now under the foot, I can now just scooch out with something small and skinny like my snips. So now I've got my 2 threads. Fabulous. We're ready to sew. So think of it as a little quickie in threading and bobbin making. Are you going to be able to see from that? Okay, so our design goes, can we see it? We're going to let's do it. So we've got the how should we call it, large, let's say that one's, where's the light, oh heavens above, is it over? Can you see? Do you know what, I think we might need to move a bit. Can we move? There we go. Whoop. Sorry, this is a bit, is that a little bit better light? I think so. Okay, let's call this, let's say this one is large, this one is small. So on the top row of 2, we're going to have large on the left. And then for the bottom 2, we're going to reverse that and have large on the right. This has got a little bit of selvage, don't worry, because that's going to be enclosed in a seam. Very simply, very simply. Honestly, there will be people watching this going, oh God, I was doing that when I was 4 years old. Great if you're doing it when you're 4 years old. Some people have never used a sewing machine before, so let's be kind and give them a hand. I need to join these 2 pieces together, so I'm going to make a seam that when we look at it when it's open, it looks like it's down the middle. So putting my right sides together, as in the right side. You'll hear people talking about right side, wrong side. This is the right side, it's the side with the pattern. That's the wrong side because there's no pattern. So I'm going to put my 2 pieces together. Let me just do it on the table a second so they are accurately together. Is this, oh, maybe you need a little bit, there we go, then you can see. And I'm going to do a simple straight stitch. I've got my, again, it's whatever the settings are on your sewing machine, but I'm just using a straight stitch that's actually in the middle of when I look at my foot. I can throw my stitch to one side, to the other side. I want it right in the middle, and then I know where I am. And also, on your foot plate, you should have markings. They should have measurement markings, because we want a 1 centimetre seam on this. You may have a really, really old machine. You may have had one handed down to you, lucky you. It may not have any markings on this, but you can put your own markings on with a piece of coloured tape, sticky tape, marking it 1 centimetre away from where the needle hits. So find your 1 centimetre mark. There's our fabric just about there. Now I don't need to over sew at either end in terms of going backwards and forwards to catch the stitch to hold it there, because actually the ends, I'll show you what I mean. Sorry, I'm not making much sense. Often when you start a piece, I'll show you when we do the backs about going backwards and forwards to knot in place your stitch. We don't worry about it on this because these seams are going to be caught into another seam later on. So very simply, we're going to sew in a straight line, keeping it at 1 centimetre. When I finish, I'm just going to lift my needle back up to its start position, and you can tell your start position when, I've forgotten what this thing's called, the head thing there is up and out of the way. Just get rid of my threads there. Now, we can see on our top bit that the small pattern is on the top here. Now we're going to do our bottom half. So this one is going to fold over. Do it on the table again just to find a straight edge. Done. Exactly the same. 1 centimetre. Let's start. There we go. Excuse me. Don't need my threads that are hanging down. So, quick snip. Where's my bin? So now, sorry, excuse me. That's the top half of my lavender bag. That's the bottom half. I'm going to open them out. I so need more hands. Sorry. So now we've got the beginnings of our two halves. Now we're going to go over to the ironing board. I don't need to show you, do I? I'm just going to press open my seams. I'll get them pressed and then show, because it's easier to show after they're pressed. There we go. So that's what I've done. You can see I've pressed if I show it to you like that, you can see how I've pressed that seam open. Some people press to one side, some people... I like to press them open. I just think it's a sort of a nicer, flatter finish for these lavender bags. So, guess what we're doing next? Top half, bottom half. So we've got our two halves again. So now we're going to right sides together. But on this time when you're doing it, just make sure you line up where you've got those... Oh, light is an issue. Line up where you've got the seams that you've just made by joining your pieces. Get those lined up. And once again, a 1 centimetre seam. So exactly as we just did. now we've got our little patched piece. And once again, back to the ironing board to press this seam open, and then we can start to think about putting the back on. I'll clear the sewing machine away briefly for that. So let me go and press, and then we'll put the back on. So that seam I just made across the entire centre of it, that too is now pressed open. So you can see it just gives everything a much kind of tidier, flatter finish. So I've got it right. I need a slug of water, sorry. I've got my patchworked section face up. To me, that's the top. This is the bottom. So this is where I'm going to have an opening for getting the lavender in. And then I've got my back piece. Sometimes it's a coordinating colour, sometimes it will match one of the patches, in this case these two patches. So again, right sides together. Now, remembering that this is going to be my opening, again, because I'm right-handed, I'm just going to turn this round a moment. This is going to be my opening for putting my lavender in, and I happen to know that I need to give myself an opening about, I'm going to put a pin to mark my openings. This is just based on, I use a jam funnel of all things to pour my lavender in. It's because it's got a nice wide opening. So that's my bottom, that's my opening. And then just a pin to each side, just to hold it in place while I'm sewing the two halves together. I'm just sort of pinning it through the middle, sort of where I've got those seams. So, ouch. So now I'm all pinned up. Let's start. Now, what I meant earlier about when I said I didn't need to worry about over sewing at the ends, because as I sew, let me. Is that a bit brighter? As I sew now the two halves together, I'm going to sew right across that. So in effect, that little tiny open end, that's now going to be trapped in a row of sewing. When I come to the opening though, at either side, I'll stop sewing, so there'll be no sewing here. I will over sew each end, just to make sure it doesn't pop open. Right, so let's pop the sewing machine back around. Pin pot. So, one side of my opening, the other side of my opening. I'm going to come to this nearest one. Pin can come out. I'm going to find my 1 centimetre mark again. And then this is my reverse. I got this machine. My old machine I preferred because it was a switch, so it would stay in reverse. This one, it won't. I have to hold this down the whole time. But, you know, otherwise I love this machine and I'm very grateful to have it. So I'm going to go forward a couple of stitches, backwards a couple, forwards a couple, backwards a couple, forwards, and carry on. And all that does is it just locks that stitch in there so that when I open it to pour the lavender in, it won't all open and unravel. It's like creating a little knot. One more stitch to get it to tighten. Now, the needle is down through the fabric. It's almost fully down. I need to change direction, but I'm going to leave the needle in, raise the foot, turn my fabric, and you see the fabric is actually pivoting on the needle. I hope this is picking up. That needle is still there, and then I'm going to lower the foot. When you turn your corner like that, leave the needle in, in the fabric, goodly in. It just means that now when we go to do the next stitch, we're in the right place. We haven't accidentally moved the fabric more than a couple of millimetres, we haven't overstretched a stitch, it's going to start exactly where it should again. So now we can carry on to the next corner. One more stitch to get me there. Keep my needle down. Turn fabric with the needle in it. And this time I'm coming to the the other side of the opening. So essentially I'm finishing off the machine bit now. To there, so reverse, forward, reverse, forward, reverse, forward. Oh, I can't talk and reverse at the same time. So that's now finished. Needle right up out of the way, foot up, thread off. And essentially, I'm going to get rid of these extraneous threads. I have now, that's me done with my machine sewing. Does it pick up? Gone back and forth a little bit for the opening. I realise, sorry, I'm battling tricky light today. It's not, I should have done it in a different colour thread, but then it would have stuck out and been wrong. So we've got our, it's all the wrong way out, so let's turn it. It's always the fun bit. It's always the, yay, we're nearly there. I always think, oh, I'm nearly there. And then I remember, oh, there's all the hand sewing to do. Now you could trim your corners ever so slightly if you wanted to. I don't worry about it. So turn it out as best you can. Then with something long and pokey, but not too sharp, because you don't want to go through your fabric. This is an old crochet hook, not using the hook end, use the handle end to just, where you can see it, just give my corners a poke, make them a little bit more defined. When I'm doing a number of these, it's this stage, this sort of the turning and the poking, that's quite a nice thing to do late in the evening as the last job of the day before sort of filling and doing all that the next day. Just sit on the sofa with, what was the last batch? It was about 70, something like that. A couple of hours later, they're all turned and beginning to look like how they should. So what I'm going to do now, the final bit before filling, is I'm going to press them, because you can see I've got my ragged opening. So when I press it, I wonder how I can show you. I'm going to press it so that that 1 centimetre is inside, tucked inside, and then I'll press it. Actually, let me just, it's just behind you. Give me a tick, I'll just press it shut. Good, now I can turn the iron off. Excuse me. I don't normally leave my iron on all the time, and I don't sort of normally sew and then iron, and then in that, normally I would do all of the tops, like that first half that we did, the tops, I would do that for a couple of hours, then iron them all. And then, anyway, you get the drift, so it's off, good. But it's worth that final press to get a really neat, you can see how neat those edges are now for when we come to sew it up. Okay, so next thing, let's fill it. My normal cup that I use, my 1 cup, it's actually, it's in the sink from this morning from my breakfast. I haven't washed it up yet, so it will be, instead, it'll be 4 of these. Will be the equivalent of 50 grams of beautiful, oh, this beautiful organic lavender, grown, harvested and everything else with a whole lot of love. Now, let's just pop a pin in there. I've found a pin with a lavender colour blob on the end of it. And now what I'm going to do is a slip stitch all the way along. We don't need to do the slip stitch together, do we? I do a slip stitch all the way along to close it, and then for your final stitch, where you do maybe a couple of stitches to finish off, I haven't got a needle to hand to show you, but then with my last stitch, what I do is I put the needle into the bag and I bring it up halfway through one of the patches. Snip the thread off, don't snip your patch, snip the thread off, tug it a bit, and then the remaining bit of thread disappears back inside the bag, and that means you get it completely, it's not invisible, we can see our stitches, but there's no sort of, you can't see any kind of knot or leftover bit of thread at the end. It just finishes it really neatly. Do you know what? I'll quickly do this one and show you what I mean right at the end. So give me 10 minutes to sew this one shut, and then I'll show you what I mean with the last stitch. Nearly there. 3/4 of the way there. You could, of course, finish it off by machine, but I've come under my stitch there. That's what happens when you try and talk and stitch. I'd be no good in a stitch and natter group. Yeah, you could, of course, finish it by machine, but I just think, well, I love the quietness of hand sewing. Obviously, normally when I'm hand sewing, I'm not chatting. It's incredibly meditative, calm. But I also think, I don't know, for me it's like a little act of love at the end of making the bag. No noisy machine, just me putting myriad little stitches in for someone else. And close the ear. Also, I think it's, I like working with my hands, you know, it's like growing my food. I like being in the garden. I like it when my hands are in the dirt and I'm making food for myself. There's something intensely satisfying about not having to rely on machines, not having to rely on anyone else. It's just me and my hands doing the work, creating, or, you know, making food, sewing, whatever it is. Right, so now I'm at my last stitch. I'll try and explain what I mean. So, little teeny tiny stitches. I'm going to put my very last stitch in now, and then I'm catching a loop there, pass my needle through it once, twice. That's making my little finishing knot. Now if I was to snip it, there'd be a bit of thread, you know, just hanging there. It'd be kind of ugly. So shake my lavender into the bottom, make a nice fat bottom for me to aim at. So pretty much where that stitch was made, I'm going to go back in with my needle. I don't normally do it at this angle. Hang on a sec. So I'm popping my needle back in where I made that stitch, and then I'm going to it's going to come up and out in the middle of the bag. Hang on, we're dangling. So that's where my stitch went in, and you can see it's coming out in the middle of the patch. If I pull it taut, there's no two ways. I can't do this and film at the same time. So I've now trimmed it. Can you see there's a little bit left sticking up in the middle of the patch? But then, when I shake it all back, it's disappeared from there, and you can't see where I finished it there. So I wonder if the camera will pick up on those. It's just such a joy to put little stitches in like that. It's one of life's great pleasures, to me anyway. Like I said, yeah, you could have had that done in 2 seconds on the sewing machine. Instead, it took me 2 minutes and a little bit of love. So there's your finished lavender bag. Now, my lovelies, what is this light? Can you see? It's the light's moved around, so now it's hitting the floor and it's bouncing up. So I look all kind of pale and ghostly again. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was some useful stuff for you, for any of you who are, you know, complete beginners. But you know, your bobbin and just keeping the needle in when you turn your fabric, marking your foot plate so you know your seam allowance if you want to have a bigger seam or a smaller seam. But more than anything, I hope you will have a go. I hope people will still please keep buying them from me as well, because this is my cottage industry, you know. Yes, you can have a cottage industry even in the middle of a city like London. It's still a cottage industry. It's something I do in order to, you know, pay my bills and buy me food. And it's a joy. It's an absolute joy to do. The smell of summer. All right, lovelies, I will see you again really soon, I hope. Actually, probably next time I see you, I'll be chatting about all sorts of stuff whilst filling all the other bags that I made and got ready for finishing, for stuffing yesterday. But we might have to do that tomorrow. I need to go and do a few other things today. I will see you soon, that's the point. Until I see you again, please look after yourselves. Happy sewing and happy experimenting with your sewing machine. If you're, you know, if you've recently had one and you're still getting used to it, just play on it. Just play on it. Don't be precious about things. Just play on it, get to know it. And before you know it, you'll be making things with confidence. Enjoy. Until the next one, cheerio.